On Sunday, September 15, 2019, two fishermen were engaged in their daily work near the aqueduct, the Neuquén province's breakwaters in Argentina. The Lime River was approached by them on the same day. They remained composed until they witnessed something that was beyond their understanding when the water floated the remains of a young girl's body, specifically limbs and a skull. Frustrated, the fishermen contacted authorities who quickly arrived at the scene. Laura Lopez, a young girl from Claudia, was quickly recalled by officers, had been missing for less than 3 days. Her physical form was not familiar. The police were unsure of her identity and continued their search in the area to discover any indications of the victim's identity. In the same river, they came across a torn-up fabric bag, tights, and shoes undergarments. It was evident that the girl had been a victim of sexual assault, not just murder. The police contacted Laura's relatives after finding the clothing and inquired if they knew about it, would be able to spot it. The officers were unaware that the investigation would uncover the truth about the case. The method used to commit the crime was even more gruesome than what had been initially suspected. Claudia, Argentina, was the birthplace of Laura Lopez on November 11, 2000. Her elder sisters, Melissa and Demaris, who were 18 years old when she was born, loved her from the first day. Laura's mother passed away when she was only 3 years old, and all 3 siblings were left as orphans under the care of their father. Despite his initial efforts to provide for the family, the father eventually became addicted to alcoholism. A few years later, despite the challenges she faced, Laura was known for her sweet and loving nature. That's why her sister began referring to her as Cielo, a nickname that everyone who knew her would call her. She was referred to by her. The girl's father was laid off years later, necessitating them to find more work. At 18 years old, Cielo began vending fried pastries during the day. She went to high school in the evening, and during her free time from studying, she spent doing something else, ensure the well-being of her nieces and nephews. At the onset of her schooling, she had aspirations of finding a good job to restore her financial stability. A sense of stability has been bestowed upon her family. Unluckily, something took place that prevented this from happening. Cielo and Demarest spent the entire day on September 12, 2019 drinking tea with each other. Demarest finished renovating the house. Her sister joked that she had never made tea like her before. Either way, it's a good thing. It was a pleasant day. Cielo later attended school where her peers observed something sporadic about the routine. She chose to sit at the back of the class instead of her usual spot and left after 20 minutes, the conclusion of the lesson. A friend greeted Cielo as he returned home at approximately 11:30 p.m. They spent some time conversing, drinking a few drinks, and taking selfies for social media. At 3 a.m., they said their goodbyes, and Cielo admitted to feeling tired, but having a plan for the future to go to sleep. A message was sent by Melissa to Lisa the next day inquiring if she had sought medical attention for her ear issues. She was unresponsive, anxious. Melissa contacted Demaris to inquire about Cielo's presence, which led to concern, the sisters of Cielo. She was nowhere to be found, and her phone was switched off. They contacted the police as they found no evidence of her presence for several hours. They were informed at the police station that they had to wait for 48 hours from the last news item. Cielo was last seen by them before they filed a missing person report. The officers speculated that she might have had a boyfriend, as it was believed to be common. Adolescents encountering a situation. Saturday was characterized by the absence of life to Cielo. The report was only accepted by the police at that point, leading to a search. Sadly, it was already too late. The Lemay River's breakwater area was the location where two fishermen were working on Sunday the 15th. Plotier is just 15 kilometers away from where Cielo calls home. They remained composed until they encountered something that caught their attention. A young girl's body, including limbs and a skull, was said to be found floating in the water. They promptly informed the authorities about this. Upon arrival, the officers observed that the brutality had been extinguished with great force. The body is the subject of discussion. It was apparent that the person in question had a thorough understanding of knives. The search for clues in the area was ongoing, with detectives still searching for any leads. The individual affected: a fabric bag, leggings, and underwear were discovered in the same river, but completely destroyed. They came across 2 rings while conducting their search. Finally, officers searched the riverbed and found a blood-stained knife. Cielo's family was soon referred to by them. Damaris spotted the attire upon her arrival at the location, and without hesitation, she took action. Without hesitation, she confirmed that it was her sister's property. The fishermen discovered Laura Lopez's limbs and skull in the shallow waters downstream from where they accidentally found her. The discovery of a young woman's body in Lemay River was made by firefighters around 11:30 on Monday. It had already been entrusted to the Forensic Expert Corps for examination. The autopsy was performed by Dr. Carlos Cordillo. He ascertained that the death was caused by a severe blow to the head leading to internal bleeding, a throbbing of the brain. A blow to the back of her head caused her to become unconscious. Cielo endured 2 to 4 hours of agony. She could have survived if she had been treated properly. Furthermore, her arms were found to have bruises, indicating that she had been beaten and had some facial trauma, struggled her way towards the attacker. Cielo's sister's fears were validated by the forensic expert. The discovery of intimate wounds on her body was a clear indication of sexual assault. He also said that the recognizable marks of cuts on her neck, arms, and legs mentioned that the culprit had a history of approaching on kitchen knives. The assailant's lack of medical or anatomical knowledge was emphasized, which further intensified the problem. The roster of suspects. The detectives were unaware of the individual accountable for this terrible crime. After 3:00 a.m. on Friday, they analyzed Cielo's mobile phone and discovered that it was lost. Her contact had been with a man named Alfredo Emilio Escobar, a mechanic by profession. He was 28 years old. He and Cielo were both students in high school, and he had a passion for hunting and fishing, inspiringly enabling him to wield a knife. The distance between the girl's home and his house was 2.5 kilometers and/or 20 blocks, which made it convenient. The reception of signals from the antennas is potent. The girl was contacted by this person 4 times on September 13th at 3.16, 3.22, and 3:36 a.m. The man. At that point, the antennas established that they were both at home. Then both mobiles were activated in the vicinity of the girl's abode. The phone of Cielo headed towards the city center and arrived at Escobar's residence by 5 a.m. The girl's WhatsApp story featured an alien emoji, and her phone was still being tracked down. The man's dwelling was where I found him. At 5:52 a.m., the girl's mobile phone ceased to function. There was no communication from her thereafter. The records also indicated that Escobar had not re-entered his cell phone until 11:05 p.m. the following day, a day back. In Chino Muerta, where Cielo was hiding, the antenna of a nearby telephone pole detected a phone during this time. Subsequently, the remains were uncovered. Escobar came back home at 12:05 p.m. on September 15th. The video was captured by 13 cameras, which cover both city cameras and private residences. The stores were also examined. 2 individuals whose names were revealed were shown in specific recordings from the early morning of September 13th. The physical features were reminiscent of those of Cielo and Escobar. The young girl's mobile phone was in a state of mobility at the same time. Escobar was the only suspect in this case without a doubt. This man was recognized by one of the agents during the investigation. He reminisced about encountering him on Highway 22 a year ago, which was the way they were crossing to meet up with their families, the towns of Nuquin and Plaudier. A patrol car was hit by a young man who had been driving at velocities of over 80 kilometers per hour. The hour is a crucial one. He refused to be arrested, and a lawsuit was brought against him. Escobar was on the brink of going to court for that incident, but now the charges were completely different. The situation is distinct and has a greater gravity. At 8:30 a.m. on September 17th, a police patrol was present at the scene, which was roughly 30 meters away from Escobar's residence, had been working diligently. A young man who looked like the suspect was spotted driving away from a Fiat Ducato minibus that they had observed, exited. He was immediately recognized by the police based on his physical attributes, including his face shape, facial features, and hairstyle. He entered the house and later emerged with two adults around 60 years old. The trio got into a vehicle heading towards Highway 22 without any suspicion. Police chased the vehicle for a while and found it stopped in an area of nowhere. The zone is situated roughly 30 meters away from a bridge that connects New Cane and Cipolletti. The elderly man and Escobar exited the vehicle simultaneously. The police proceeded to ask for identification. Escobar was accompanied by his father and another man while his mother was in the car. It was evident that they were attempting to escape the city. The young man did not hesitate to undergo the procedure, but was visibly anxious. Shortly after, Escobar was brought to the police station and his vehicle was seized. Following that, he was subjected to a medical examination. The examination revealed swollen areas on the knuckles of his right hand's fingers, consistent with the use of a punching hand. He sustained cuts and bruises on the palm of his right hand. Cielo's death occurred on the same day as a few days before. These findings led to Escobar being charged with the rape and murder of the girl. Despite his request to remain silent, he was detained in custody for 6 months. There was a fear that he might escape or interfere with the investigation. On September 1st, the first search warrant was issued at the Estrada Street residence, the location where the Escobar family made their home. The property was sizable, incorporating a construction site and 2 buildings in the back. Upon entering the sleeping area where Escobar was present, officers discovered fingerprints on the walls. The use of luminol to check them resulted in the discovery of bloodstains. A cloth stained with blood was also found by officers during the search. The situation worsened as they walked to the building that was behind the residence. Crumpled vegetation was found to have blood spots. Blood was also present on the gates, the right handle of a cart, and on one end of an infrared emitting device, a device. It was in this place that the blow that caused Cielo's death occurred, as could be seen. The search team found bloodstains at the location and then examined samples for comparison. The blood of the girl and Escobar was present. The fluid found on Cielo's body was also examined through DNA analysis. The lawyer representing Escobar stated that rape charges should not be brought up until the outcome is determined. We were seized. Nonetheless, the outcomes were achieved in a short time frame. The Ministry of Health Central Laboratory scrutinized the samples collected during the outbreak. The victim and accused genetic profiles are matched in the search. At the time of his arrest, Escobar was wearing sneakers, and a knife was discovered at the river's bottom. They were also examined. Cielo was found to have DNA matching on both items. The victim's genital area was examined using 3 swabs. Escobar's DNA was compatible with one of them. As a result, investigators could already be certain that this individual had sexually assaulted the victim. The girl was killed, dismembered, and disposed of the corpse. The confirmation was made by law enforcement officials during a press conference on September 21st. Prosecutor Juan Agustin Garcia said he believed Escobar was guilty of the crime. He accused Cielo of murdering him to cover up his rape and stated that he could be prosecuted in the event of a guilty verdict, could be sentenced to life in prison. Similar to this, more evidence was still required. Technology played a significant role in Escobar's discovery. Even though he did not plead guilty, the court ordered the seizure of his mobile phone, and he was required to furnish the access code. Scrutiny. Despite having Cielo as one of his contacts, it was discovered that he had removed her from the conversation on the night, the disappearance of her. The victim's call history was deleted by him, but their social security number was not removed. Dialogues with the media. The suspect's actions on September 11, 1213 were also revealed during the investigation. Visited the social media site to check out pictures shared by Cielo. Escobar maintained his innocence despite the evidence against him. Nevertheless, the evidence indicated that he was accountable for the murder. Ultimately, a conclusion was reached concerning the events that transpired on the night of the crime. On September 12, 2019, Cielo departed from school at approximately 8 p.m. After spending time with a friend, she stated that she was tired and would go to sleep. Sleeping is the purpose of this. She was contacted by Escobar at 3:40 in the morning, and they started a conversation. She and him were not friends, but she agreed to meet him and they went back to his house. The events that occurred inside the house remained unanswered. Nonetheless, the research indicates that Cielo refrained from having personal encounters with Escobar. In a fit of rage, he sexually assaulted her. He took his own life out of fear that she might report him to the authorities. He escorted her to the backyard, hitting her on the head twice. Cielo was alive at that point, and Escobar acted cruelly by hiding her body for several hours. In order to avoid being caught unawares, he also shut down his phone. Cielo's body had been lying in the shed for almost a day, and she passed away due to the injuries. The body was dismembered with a sharp knife that Besh Cabot had hidden in his kitchen. He loaded the body parts into his Fiat Ducato minibus and drove for 15 kilometers to reach his destination, the area where the breakwaters are located. He came back to the location and turned on his phone, feeling relieved and contemplating. The conclusion was reached. This case has become a public concern for the entire city. Mnuchin has strongly denounced the accused. The statement was met with a range of responses. Some people sympathized with her situation, while others accused her of complicity. In the midst of these assaults, the girl requested that Cielo and her team remain attentive. Her family is a part of it. Melissa subsequently got in touch with Escobar's sister, expressed her gratitude for the message, and requested an explanation. It's time for people to cease attacking the girl since she has no history of harm. The criminal case was immediately pursued by the prosecution. The initial court proceedings were conducted in the Provincial Legislative Assembly. According to the Newcombe prosecutor, Escobar was fully responsible for his actions. The girl was allegedly killed through gender-based violence in addition to other charges, the act of rape. In the same hearing, professionals who were involved in the examination of the attire discovered in that case. The river, in conjunction with the remains and evidence found in the man's house, provided their testimony. Testimonies. Florencia, Cielo's closest friend, was the most unexpected. She stated that Escobar had been sending messages to the victim for several months inviting her to join him, to socialize and enjoy a drink. Despite this, they had never met before. She stated that she had been acquainted with him for 5 years and was aware that he didn't have it, a highly commendable standing. Parties at Escobar's house had been a regular occurrence over the years. The house was strewn with alcohol and occurrence over the years. The house was strewn with alcohol and psychoactive substances. Intimate liaisons were openly shared by couples. According to Florencia, she had advised her friend against dating Escobar on multiple occasions. The girl consistently replied with a refusal to respond. The girl consistently replied with a refusal to respond and an inability to reply to his messages. The defense questioned why she had not suggested blocking Escobar's number. In response, Florencia stated that her friend had made the decision, and she didn't want to dictate anything, her life. They exhibited the girl's surveillance camera footage while she was on the stand, the day that Cielo went missing. They exhibited her a recording from EAR at 4:00 a.m., which showed 2 individuals standing on opposite sides of the screen, individuals heading towards the central district of the city. Florencia reluctantly acknowledged that it was Cielo. She affirmed that her sneakers, jacket, and walking style were unmistakable. The girl also recognized Escobar. The testimony of Escobar's friend exposed his impulsiveness as the judge accused him of infidelity. His behavior was marked by substance abuse and womanizing tendencies. His ex-partner was also present in court. According to her, their relationship ended in a negative way many years ago. She reported him to the authorities as she believed he had burglarized her home and stolen money. When she reached out to him to ask for the money back, he ran after her friend who was with her. The defendant attempted to defend himself after examining the testimonies. Escobar pointed to his friend who sold him illegal substances as the actual offender, the offense committed. That night, I was in a state of unconsciousness. My admission is that I have committed the act of removing blood and discarding it. He stated to the local media that he had not committed murder. According to him, he was intoxicated that evening, and this individual was also under the influence of drugs in his residence with Cielo. After hearing a scream from one of the rooms, Escobar immediately went to investigate what had taken place. The blood was visible and he proceeded to clean it up. He aided his friend in disguising the body. He expressed gratitude towards them for allowing him to share his supposed story at the end. The truth is what matters most. Despite the lack of evidence, this statement was not validated. Escobar was the lone suspect. The prosecutor stated in his closing argument that this man exploited the fact that they betrayed the victim's trust by being somewhat familiar with her. He orchestrated the cruelness of his behavior and the gruesome method of disposing of the remains. Alfredo Emilio Escobar received a unanimous verdict after the jury deliberated for only 40 minutes, convicted of raping and murdering Laura Cielo Lopez, aged 18. The charge that the latter one was brought up was made worse because it was aimed at hiding the attack. The issue of gender violence was a part of it. Due to these reasons, he was given a life sentence with no chance of release. The Cielo Lopez law, which was passed by the New Quinn provincial government, has been in effect since then. Strive to eradicate violence against women. All ages, including students and teachers, are required to receive training on gender violence. Fortunately, he was not forgotten, and a life sentence is reassuring. The victim cannot be brought back to life by involving society and the family, as per Marcelo Henriques, the family's lawyer in Velasco. The Kathleen Alexandra Llana case. Guayaquil, the capital of the Guayas province, is one of the largest cities in Ecuador. Located on a peninsula by the Guayas River, it serves as the country's commercial hub. Known as the gateway to the Pacific beaches and the famous Galapagos Islands, Guayaquil is also a major port and center for imports and exports. It's the second most populated city in Ecuador, after Quito, with a rough estimate of 2,700,000 inhabitants. Approximately 400,000 of these residents live in Guasmo Sur, one of the informal neighborhoods in the southern central part of the city. Guasmo Sur is considered the poorest neighborhood in Guayaquil. It struggles with overpopulation, poverty, and frequent criminal activities. Most of its current inhabitants are migrants from rural areas who move to this urban but isolated part of Guayaquil, seeking better employment opportunities and an improved quality of life. The majority of the buildings in Guasmo Sur are made of blocks, yet some houses are constructed with wood, cardboard, and other common materials. The area was named Guasmo because of the once abundant tropical trees of the same name, which were later felled to pave the way for urban development and local industries. In 2018, 19-year-old Kathleen Alexandra Llana resided in Guasmo Sur. Her residence was owned by Ramiro Altamirano. According to him, it wasn't profitable to rent out one of his ground floor spaces for businesses, as tenants frequently failed and returned the keys. As a result, he decided to remodel the commercial space into a residential apartment. The first tenants arrived on August 9, 2018, a family consisting of a mother and her 4 children, with Kathleen Llana being the oldest daughter. He lived on the upper floor of the same building. Relatives and neighbors of Kathleen Llana described her as a calm girl with no signs of violent tendencies. By October 2018, Kathleen was working because she had applied for a university spot, which she unfortunately did not secure. Less than 5 kilometers away from Guasmo Sur lies Isla Trinitaria, an area crisscrossed by the perimeter road and also plagued with security issues. Isla Trinitaria has a predominantly Afro-descendant population, with many of their homes being built on illegally acquired land and constructed with cement and cane. In Isla Trinitaria, 21-year-old Veronica Jasmine Silva Ruiz lived in the southern part of the main port. Veronica Silva was studying systems engineering at the University of Guayaquil and was about to begin her second semester. She lived with her parents and siblings, being the youngest daughter of Alberto Silva and Maria Ruiz. Many claimed that Veronica and Kathleen Llana had been friends since school days, but Veronica's mother was unaware of this relationship and did not know Kathleen. However, it's confirmed that both young women shared 2 things in common. They were neighbors and both knew Yarbrough Works, a 20-year-old man. Maria Ruiz, Veronica's mother, also didn't know about the alleged romantic relationship her daughter had with Yarbrough, who had also been Kathleen Llana's romantic partner. On the morning of Tuesday, October 2, 2018, Veronica left her home early. By 9 a.m., she bid her parents farewell, heading to the University of Guayaquil. That was the last time they saw her alive. Her mother mentioned that Veronica went to the university without breakfast as she needed to submit a document and intended to return home quickly for lunch. Her father mentioned expecting her home around 11 a.m. When they didn't hear from her, her disappearance was reported to the prosecutor's office on the morning of Wednesday, October 3, 2018. 34 hours after Veronica's departure, her elder sister Rudy received a mysterious friend request on Facebook. A 20-year-old man identified himself as Veronica's boyfriend, claiming he knew of Veronica's whereabouts since his ex-mother-in-law had shown him some of her personal belongings. These items were found in an apartment in Yarbrough, which belonged to Kathleen Liana. Rudy informed her parents about this Facebook conversation, and they went to the flagrancy unit of the state prosecutor's office that Wednesday night to report the information. Around 7 p.m., investigators from the National Department of Crimes Against Life, Violent Deaths, Disappearances, Extortion, and Kidnapping confirmed that the body they had discovered dismembered at 2 p.m. that same day matched the family's descriptions. Initially, it was believed that Veronica never went to the university that day but had been lured to Kathleen Liana's apartment, located 6 blocks from where they found Veronica's dismembered body. Liana allegedly called Veronica to gossip about her boyfriend, who had previously been Liana's partner and, according to Liana, was still secretly seeing her. Later, it was confirmed that Veronica did attend the university on the morning of October 2, 2018, as she had told her parents. This account was corroborated by a university professor and later shared with agents from the National Department of Crimes Against Life, Violent Deaths, Disappearances, Extortion, and Kidnapping when they were investigating the disappearance. Veronica Silva was last seen at the university with a young woman believed to be Kathleen Liana and a young man. Their identities could not be confirmed as the faculty's security cameras were offline. By the afternoon of Wednesday, October 3rd, Veronica Silva's body was discovered inside 2 black bags placed within plastic boxes on a tricycle in Yarbrough. Bystanders, upon discovering the human remains, alerted the authorities. The tricycle was seized for investigation. At 10:30 p.m. on Wednesday, October 3rd, Kathleen Liana confessed to the murder. "I cut her in half," she informed the police. Her account of the crime was harrowing. Kathleen claimed she had invited Veronica Silva to her home on Tuesday, October 2nd, under the pretext of gossip. In reality, she wanted to confront her about the relationship Veronica allegedly had with Kathleen's ex-boyfriend. The two were supposedly still seeing each other secretly, and he had proposed to Veronica. When Veronica tried to leave, Kathleen threatened her with a knife. Kathleen tied Veronica's arms behind her back with plastic and began strangling her with an electrical cord. According to Kathleen, Veronica pleaded to be let go. There were moments Kathleen would relent, only to tighten the cord again. At some point, Veronica attempted to grab a knife, resulting in a struggle on the floor where Kathleen eventually strangled Veronica to death. After the murder, Kathleen tried to dismember the body with a kitchen knife but couldn't sever the head. She attempted to burn the face with alcohol, succeeding only in burning Veronica's hair and face. With family due home soon, Kathleen hid the body beneath her bed, covering it with stuffed animals and sheets. Disturbingly, she slept that night with Veronica's body still under the bed. On Wednesday, October 3rd, 2018, Kathleen decided to incinerate the body but failed. She placed the body parts in bags and sought out her uncle, Jose Rodriguez, to borrow his work tricycle. Initially hesitant, he eventually lent it to her. When she delayed returning it, he went to look for her, but she was nowhere to be found. Kathleen later told him the tricycle had been stolen, but he discovered from colleagues that the police had confiscated it due to its involvement in a death. Kathleen also admitted to asking a passerby for help loading the heavy bags onto the tricycle. After placing Veronica's remains on the tricycle, Kathleen paid a minor cousin $5 to help her push the tricycle toward a garbage dump, with the boy unaware of the gruesome contents within the bags. 5 blocks away from Kathleen's house, one of the bags fell off the tricycle. Panicking, Kathleen fled when a security guard approached her for littering. Ramiro, the owner of the building where the murder occurred, reported never hearing any alarming noises or cries from upstairs. He only noticed a strong scent, similar to chicken blood. Considering that chickens are frequently slaughtered in the area, he dismissed the smell, not thinking it came from a human body or his own building. In fact, he even considered confronting them about a potential spill, but his wife advised against it. That night, over 10 police officers raided his house. Upon surrendering to the police, Kathleen Liana claimed she acted alone. However, investigators were suspicious there might be other accomplices. Veronica's mother, Maria Ruiz, also doubted Kathleen's solitary involvement, pointing out her daughter's height and strength. Given Kathleen's story, the primary theory presented by the National Department of Crimes Against Life, violent deaths, disappearances, extortion, and kidnapping was that of a crime of passion stemming from jealousy. Specifically, it was believed to revolve around a presumed love triangle involving Veronica Silva, Kathleen Liana, and Yarbrough Alexander. It's noteworthy that Veronica's mother had never heard of these individuals before. Later, Kathleen changed her account, implicating Yarbrough in the crime. She alleged that Yarbrough was prostituting them via a website and participated in Veronica's murder by holding the electrical cord used for strangulation. According to the attorney representing Veronica's family, the young university student was murdered for refusing to engage in prostitution via a website supposedly run by Yarbrough. In September 2019, Kathleen Liana was sentenced to 34 years and 8 months in prison for the murder and dismemberment of Veronica Silva in October 2018. Kathleen's defense appealed the ruling, considering it unjust. In October 2020, an appeal hearing was held, conducted virtually due to the coronavirus pandemic. The presiding judge denied the defense's claims, who now argued Kathleen had only discarded the body, not committed the murder. The verdict against Kathleen Liana included a fine of 1,000 basic salaries to the state and a $20,000 compensation to the victim's mother. During a hearing at the Prosecutor General State Flagrancy Unit, Kathleen Liana's defense requested a psychological evaluation for their client and proposed her transfer to a psychological care institution instead of the Female Social Rehabilitation Center where she had been sent. The forensic clinical psychologist stated that Kathleen might exhibit psychopathic traits and signs of schizophrenia. However, since she acted with clear intent and conscience, she wasn't exempt from legal responsibility. She had meticulously planned everything, showing premeditation and malice when committing the crime. Before becoming the center of attention, Yarbrough told the public prosecutor's office that he had known Kathleen Liana for 3 years and had a romantic relationship with her for 2 years. He mentioned ending the relationship due to her possessive nature, recalling an instance where she threatened him with scissors, warning him not to message any female friends. Yarbrough also reported that on Wednesday, October 3, 2018, Kathleen called him asking if he had a machete. When he inquired about its purpose, she claimed it was to clear some shrubs outside her house. Later that afternoon, he received a message from Kathleen saying she needed to leave as someone was looking to kill her. This was the account Yarbrough shared with the public prosecutor before becoming a prime suspect himself. Not long after, the police sought him out for questioning. Veronica Silva's mother acknowledged that while nothing could bring her daughter back, she took solace in knowing that her daughter's killer would serve a significant sentence for the heinous act. To her, justice had been served. She emphasized the need to apprehend Yarbrough, who was on the run, and who she believed also had a hand in her daughter's murder. On October 6, 2018, Veronica Silva's funeral was held. Her head was adorned with a white lace crown, making her look like a sleeping maiden. During the funeral, the song Amor Eterno by Juan Gabriel played. Her mother was inconsolable, speaking to Veronica through the glass of the casket, pleading for her to look back. Maria's grief was palpable, screaming as she refused to let go of her daughter. It was a loss she would never overcome, forever scarring her life. Maria repeatedly expressed that her daughter, a calm and peaceful young woman, didn't deserve such a brutal, horrific end. After all, who does? In September 2021, the National Police confirmed the arrest of Yarbrough Alexander Borks Bastidas. He is believed to be the second individual involved in the murder of his girlfriend. 22-year-old Brandon Gonzalez lived with his small family in Gorgayan West. Now Goregaon West was becoming a crowded suburb in Mumbai city. Besides Gonzalez, his family only consisted of his mother and older sister. On December 19, 2016, like every day, Gonzalez went for a morning walk from his home to Ari Colony. Usually, he would return home within an hour after his stroll, but today he didn't come back until afternoon. Concerned, Gonzalez's mother, Seema, and older sister, Kazma, first called his friends because he had left his phone at home today. Despite contacting some friends, they couldn't find any information about Gonzalez. Now the sun had already set, and night was slowly falling. Worried about their son, Seema took her daughter and went to the nearby Dindoki police station to file a missing person report. Now besides Gonçalvez's family and friends, the police are also trying to find him. Meanwhile, the Dindosi police station had distributed Gonzalez's photo to nearby police stations as well. However, amidst this, around 12:30 in the afternoon on December 22nd, a call comes to the nearby Ari police station. The caller reports that he has just seen a headless body. Upon hearing this, the police promptly rushed to the reported location in Ari Colony. Upon arrival, the scene that a witness astonishes them. There, beneath a tree, lies a body without a head, neck, or clothes, and upon seeing it, it seemed as if someone had placed it there deliberately. Now witnessing this sight, the police cordoned off the area completely, not allowing any ordinary person to approach. Afterwards, the police began their investigation by first examining the area nearby. Just 20 meters away from the body, the police found the head and clothes stained with blood. Additionally, a few meters away from the body, the police also found some other items used in worship, such as a mirror, coconut, padukas, threads, turmeric powder, and kumkum powder, aka vermilion. Anyway, the police collected these items and sent the body to a nearby hospital for post-mortem. Subsequently, the files of missing persons were checked at the Ari police station, and the identification of this dead body was made with a boy named Brandon Gonçalves. As I mentioned earlier, the missing report of Brandon Gonçalves had been distributed to all nearby police stations by Dindosi police. So now the Ari police confirmed that he was the same boy who had gone missing 3 days ago on December 19th. Well, now Gonçalves' family is also informed, and thus the missing case of Gonçalves turns into a murder case. After this, as far as I have read, perhaps the police had to form 8+ teams to search for Gonçalves' killer, including a special team from the crime branch. But Salve's killer, including a special team from the crime branch. But seeing the body of her only son in this condition, Gonçalves' mother, Seema, and elder sister, Kashma, were both in a terrible state of distress. So much so that when Seema saw her son in this condition, she fainted upon seeing the body. However, the police quickly began their investigation to find the culprits. On the other hand, some shocking details emerged in Gonçalves' post-mortem report. The post-mortem report stated that Gonçalves' tongue, voice box, skin from his right cheek, and even his entire neck were missing with the neck bone intact. This means that someone had killed Gonçalves so brutally that even the small spine is fragment of our neck, the neck spine, was broken. All these things were horrifying the police because initially, the police thought this case seemed to be a result of personal rivalry, as if someone had killed Gonçalves to settle a score, but the police were soon to be proven wrong. Actually, according to the post-mortem report, it was found that Gonçalves' death occurred due to the separation of his head from his body. However, forensic pathologists also checked whether Gonçalves was given any drugs or substances before being killed, but nothing like that was found in any post-mortem report. After that, the police found out that Gonçalves was murdered 3 days before his body was found between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. on the same day he went missing. Additionally, there were no signs of any fight, struggle, or injury on his body, indicating that Gonçalves didn't even try to save himself until his last breath. Furthermore, 2 marks were found on Gonçalves' body. Actually, there were 2 cross symbols on his forehead and right hand, which seemed to have been made with a sharp object. After learning about all these things, this case became even more intriguing for the police and investigators because now there were a lot more questions in front of the police. Looking at Gonçalves' body, it seemed as if his body had been cut twice. First, his head was separated from his shoulders, and then later, his neck was cut from the head. Additionally, forensic experts said that where Gonzalez's body was found, there was absolutely no evidence of his murder if there's not a single trace of blood was found there. So it was clear that Gonzalez was killed somewhere else, and then some parts of his body were removed to perform some rituals or something similar. Later, his body and clothes were thrown away in this deserted place. Here, when the police found the materials of worship in glass, coconuts, slippers, turmeric, and vermilion at the crime scene, for the first time, this case seems like a human sacrifice. After the possibility arose that Gonsalve might be taken to another location and harmed, the police began checking the CCTV cameras around the Ari colony. But first, they checked the CCTV cameras around his house. They saw Gonsalve leaving with his dog around 7 o'clock in the morning and returning after a morning walk within an hour. However, just 10 minutes later, Gonzalez left his house again, but this time with a bag. Now what was in that bag could not be determined because the bag itself was not found. But then a little further from Gonzalez's house, the police spotted a white Audi car in another CCTV footage with two people inside, a driver and a woman in a white Punjabi suit. It was shown in the CCTV that they were following Gonzalez slowly with their car. The woman wearing a white Punjabi suit is given directions to the driver, telling him to take the car in that direction. However, the police also questioned Gonzalez's family members to see if anyone might know that woman and driver, but the police didn't get any good response from there either. The police suspected that there might be more than two people in the car. And unfortunately, the day Gonzalez's body was found, the two CCTV cameras in that area were not working. This raised suspicion for the police that Gonzalez was abducted on December 19th in this same car, and then murdered elsewhere with his body being thrown in a deserted place in Ari colony on the dark night or morning of December 22nd. But since then, investigators have felt that perhaps a local person might be involved in this murder case because the police chucked 70-plus CCTV cameras in this entire case. But none of them recorded anything suspicious that would raise suspicion on any individual. The investigators clarified that perhaps the killers were aware of the location of every CCTV camera in the Ari colony. This helped them in escaping from the colony and Gore again. This clears one thing, that the killer was someone who was well acquainted with Gorgon and the colony, because an outsider couldn't have known every road in CCTV so well. The investigators explored all possible angles of Gonzalez's killing, such as a love affair angle, whether someone jealous killed Gonzalez, any personal rivalry, human sacrifice angle, robbery, and property dispute. But the police never found any leads in any angle. Although for some time, the police kept the angle of human sacrifice on the table and even questioned several tantrics, babas, and black magicians about the cut parts of the body, the mark of the cross on the forehead and the right hand, whether there was any connection between them or not. But the police didn't get any help from here either. Gonçalves was a middle-class boy who decided to graduate in arts. However, due to some reasons, he dropped out of college as well. His father had passed away 3 years ago, leaving Gonçalves in a state of depression for a long time. During the police investigation, Gonçalves' call records were also checked, but no suspicious numbers were found. In fact, Gonçalves rarely talked to anyone except for his family or perhaps 3 or 4 friends. But what intrigued the police in this case was finding a diary in Gonçalves' room. Within it were some sketches that further complicated this case. Actually, if these sketches are examined closely, it will be apparent that they tell the story of 2 sacrifices. In the first, a person is attempting to cut off an animal's head while wearing a suit. Meanwhile, in the second sacrifice, a man's head is being cut off with a saw. In addition to these, an attempt has been made to portray the SpongeBob cartoon character as a monster. On the other side of the page, a picture of a deer without a head has been drawn, and right next to it, only the head of a lion cub has been drawn. Furthermore, when the police went inside Gonçalves' house, they found a strange sign on a wall just behind the door, as if it were some sort of cult symbol. Now, what was even more surprising was that when the Mumbai police tried to recreate the crime scene with Gonçalves' dog, the startling thing was that Gonçalves' dog went straight to where Gonçalves' body was lying with a tree. After a while, his dog arrived at the spot where Gonçalves' body was found, just a few meters away. Among all the cases we've explained on this channel so far, this case was the weirdest. Like how Gonçalves' dog somehow went to the places where his body was found. It's possible that when Gonzalez first went out for a walk with his dog on December 19th, he might have already gone to the place where his body was found. Another point is that the white Audi car following Goncalves might have been known to him, and he might have gone with them willingly, sitting in the car. Additionally, it's possible that after returning home, Goncalves took the bag with him, which might have contained items related to worship like coconut, paducas, etc., because it's also being said on the internet that maybe Gonzalez sacrificed himself. Today, it's been over 7 years since this case, but the murderer of Brandon Gonzalez is still unknown. Meanwhile, Gonzalez's mother and sister have made numerous visits to the police station and the crime branch office to find out the status of their son, Brandon Gonzalez's murder case. During this time, Gonzalez's mother and sister were afraid that the police might close Gonzalez's murder case. Due to this reason, Seema's elder daughter, Kashma, appealed to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the state's chief minister to seek justice. Well, if this case gets solved in the future, we will definitely update you through this channel's community post. But so far, this case remains unsolved. With this, Brandon Gonzalez case also concludes here. Before moving forward, quickly subscribe to the channel. This is strange. You haven't subscribed to the channel yet. Quickly subscribe to it. Now we are jumped to the next story. This is the story of Madanapalli city in the state of Andhra Pradesh, India, which is Asia's largest tomato market. Besides, there are many mountains here as well. It was January 24th, 2021, around 8:30 p.m. on Sunday night in Madanapalli when Dr. V. Purushotham Naidu, the head of the Naidu family, called his friend Raju and said on the phone, "Both my daughters are no longer in this world. Ilkia, 27, and Sadivya, 22, have both passed away, but there's nothing to worry about. Tomorrow morning, they will come back through reincarnation because the Kalyug is ending, and the Satyug will begin from tomorrow." Upon hearing this, Raju said to his friend, "Dr. Naidu, everything is normal at home. Speaking such language against your daughters doesn't suit you." In response, Dr. Naidu said, "No, Raju, I am telling the truth. In a while, both I and your sister-in-law will leave our bodies in Kalyug and be born again in Satyug." Upon hearing this, Dr. Naidu's friend Raju started feeling extremely restless. Consequently, he abruptly ended the call and within a Naidu's house. Raju reached there, knocked on the door, and just as the door was about to open, Dr. Naidu himself appeared, looking completely normal. But when Raju went inside and saw the scene there, his eyes widened in shock because Dr. Naidu had spoken the truth. Lying on the ground in the prayer room of his house was the lifeless body of his 27-year-old daughter, Alakija. She had completed her master's in Bhopal and now was preparing for the civil services. Her face was pale and blood was oozing from various places. After this, Dr. Naidu took Raju to another room adjacent to the prayer room where the dead body of his 22-year-old daughter, Sadivya, lay on the ground. She had been struck with a trident of Lord Shiva on her forehead, and a small brass pot placed in the prayer room was inserted into her mouth. The clothes were removed from both bodies, and they were wrapped in red cloth. Additionally, their hair was partially cut, and they were placed in front of the statue of Lord Shiva in the temple. They had scattered many worship materials around the bodies. However, despite seeing the bodies of their daughters, there was no sign of tension or sorrow on the faces of Dr. Naidu and his wife, Padmaja. This behavior of his friend and his wife seemed very strange to Raju. Therefore, he bids them goodbye and leaves their house. However, instead of going home, he goes straight to the police station and tells the police the whole story of how these educated parents didn't having little belief in Raju's story after hearing this strange tale. Because for the past year, Dr. Naidu and his family, who had been living in the new house in Madanapalli, had earned quite a reputation in the city. Anyway, after that, the police station in charge, along with some officers, directly reached the Naidu family's house. When the police knocked on the door once again, it was Dr. Naidu who opened it. But seeing her husband's friend with him, Padmaja got very angry and started shouting at the police because they had once again disrupted their worship. Now the argument between the police and the Naidu family had attracted neighbors from nearby. Now as soon as the police entered the house and saw what was inside, they too were astonished. Later, after hearing Raju, the police realized that it was a case of superstition. Although Mr. and Mrs. Naidu repeatedly tried to convince the police that both their daughters would return to life before sunrise tomorrow, they were just saying that they only need a day's time, and tomorrow morning both our daughters will come back to life. Then you all will be surprised. But the police knew that both girls were dead. So how could they come back to life? Therefore, Mr. and Mrs. Naidu were first explained with great difficulty. But when they still didn't understand, the police showed some firmness and took both of them to the police station. Afterwards, a forensic team was called in to investigate the crime scene. The forensic team continued their examination for some time and then sent the bodies for post-mortem. Now the police have started investigating both inside and outside the house. Here, the police learned from neighbors of the Naidu family that someone from the family used to go out daily to buy something. But for the past 3 days, no one has come out of the house nor has anyone gone inside. Not even the maid who used to clean the house, as these people did not even call her. After that, the police directly approached the maid who told them that 3 days ago, she was told by the Naidus that we are going to perform a special worship in the house for 3 days, and until we call you, do not come to work at the house. On the other hand, upon checking both girls' social media profiles and bookshelves inside the house, the police found out that Alekia highly respects Indian philosopher Osho. On his social media posts, Osho's name appeared repeatedly, indicating that he was one of Alekia's favorite people. Additionally, beside Alekia's dead body was a book by the spiritual guru, Meher Baba. Besides, pictures of Shri Sai Baba, Meher Baba, and Osho were plastered all over their house. Furthermore, neighbors often heard prayers and tantric chants from their house, and several times they saw some swamis entering the house. On the other hand, what was surprising was that just a few days before the murder, Alekia posted twice on her Instagram. In one post, she wrote, "Work is done." And in the second post, "Shiva is coming." Well, only Dr. Naidu and Padmaja, who were present in the custody, could reveal the truth behind this. However, controlling Padmaja was proving to be extremely difficult for the police. But before the custody, when the police were taking both husband and wife for a COVID test, Padmaja started saying, "I am Shiva myself. Because of my body particles, COVID has spread everywhere. It did not come from China." After getting their COVID tests done, Dr. Naidu informed the police about his background. Actually, Dr. Naidu had a master's in philosophy and science. In addition, he had obtained a PhD and was currently a professor of chemistry at Government Degree College for Women, Nadanapalli. His wife, Padmaja, was a gold medalist in mathematics and had been teaching at the famous schools of Madanapal for nearly 23 years, including at Mastermind's IIT Talent High School. Alongside, she also had a master's in science. Additionally, Alekia, 27, was a postgraduate from Phopal and then an aspirant for civil services. Furthermore, Saidivya, a 22-year-old, was training at the A.R. Rama Music Conservatory in Mumbai after completing her Bachelor of Business Administration course. However, due to the lockdown, both of them had to return home. You might also wonder why, with such educated family members, these individuals attempted suicide. You'll find the answer by the end of the video. Afterwards, Alekia picked up Lord Shiva's trident from the temple and thrust it into her sister Divya's forehead. Then a copper vessel was placed in her mouth. Following the death of her younger sister Divya, Alekia told her mother that now she had to kill her. As a result, Padmarja struck Alekia on the head with a dumbbell kept in the house. Consequently, Alekia also died shortly thereafter. After killing both their daughters, both the husband and wife wandered around their bodies for quite some time. Now, because of the insistence of the wife and daughter, it was Dr. Nayudo's turn. Perhaps out of fear, he called his friend and told him the whole matter. And if he hadn't made that call, perhaps neither of them would be in this world today. However, due to this, Padmajaja scolded her husband, Dr. Nayudu, a lot, saying, "You are a coward. Because of you, our secret got out, and our daughters couldn't come back." After seeing all this, it was finalized in this case that due to mental illness, all these family members had planned this. And it was revealed from a psychiatrist source that their entire family was dealing with a rare disorder called shared psychotic disorder. Actually, in this disorder, more than two people who are in close relationships have a similar way of thinking. And it's because of this disorder that Alikia and Sedivia are no longer in this world today. In this double murder case, Alikia had a Canadian friend who told the print media that he couldn't believe for many days that Alikia could do such a thing. After questioning on Monday evening, funeral of both these girls were performed, and permission for this was given only to Dr. Naidu, while the girl's mother, Padmaja, was not allowed to participate for some reasons. In my opinion, in this case, Sedivia and Dr. Purushottam Naidu seem innocent to me, although if they hadn't fallen into the temptation of Alekia and Padmaja, perhaps this would have been a happy family today. So with this, the case comes to an end here. The Alice Gross case. Alice Gross was born on Valentine's Day, February 14th, in the year 2000 in London. She was raised in a loving family and had an older sister. Alice demonstrated a passion for creativity from a very young age, enjoying drawing, playing the piano and the violin. She also had an interest in fashion design, and at the age of 11, she even made a dress for her school graduation. At 14 years old, Alice was diagnosed with anorexia and depression. Despite these challenges, she continued to engage in creative activities and showed great potential for future success. On August 28, 34, during the school holidays, Alice told her mother she was going for a walk. She enjoyed strolling along the small water canal and river near her home in Hanwell, a suburb of London. Her usual walk was about 4.5 kilometers long. She left around 3 p.m., promising to return by 6 p.m. Later, she texted her father, saying she would be home soon. Alice did not return at the expected time, and by 7 p.m., with her phone turned off, her parents became anxious. Given her battle with anorexia and depression, they feared something had happened to her, particularly because her physical condition could lead to weakness or fainting. Her parents contacted her friends in hopes that she might be with them, but no one had seen her that day. They then decided to call the police. The search began immediately, focusing on Alice's usual route. Friends and relatives joined the police in their efforts. Although no trace of Alice was initially found, detectives managed to gather several eyewitness accounts that helped them establish a more accurate route for the search and identify specific surveillance cameras that might have captured her. Reviewing the footage, detectives saw Alice shortly after she left home, heading towards the Grand Union Canal and later near the Brentford area along the canal. The last camera captured her returning close to her home, near Trumpers Way Bridge. The media were alerted about the missing teenager, and her case was quickly broadcast throughout London. Thanks to this coverage, detectives received multiple calls from people who reported seeing Alice. Unfortunately, none of these efforts brought the police any closer to finding the girl. According to the security camera footage and witness statements, Alice had disappeared on her way home, having completed most of her usual route. But what happened to her remained a mystery. 3 days passed. The police continued to scrutinize the camera footage from nearby areas and also inspected local parks and other secluded areas. Meanwhile, patrol officers canvassed the homes along Alice's route and questioned local residents. On September 1st, Alice's family recorded a video message pleading for her to return home. They also asked anyone with information about her whereabouts to contact the police. Investigators were considering several theories at the time. The most disturbing was the possibility of an abduction. Even though Alice's route was mostly through city streets, there were many remote and hidden areas where she could have been attacked. Kidnappings were not unheard of in London, even less so in the suburbs. Another theory was that Alice had run away from home. Her parents feared that her depression might have led her to make such a decision. They also did not rule out the possibility that she might have taken her own life due to her illness. However, the police found these theories to be unlikely. At 14, it seemed improbable that Alice could have run away and hidden herself without help, and if she had taken her own life, her body would likely have been found. The case was drawing increasing public attention and was handed over to the Special Unit of Scotland Yard on September 3rd. Although they typically worked on murder cases, the detectives considered the possibility of the girl returning home to be high. Scotland Yard organized a massive search which was immediately joined by hundreds of volunteers. After seeing the heart-wrenching appeal from her parents and sister on the news, concerned Londoners calmed the area from dawn till dusk. The next day, detectives announced the discovery of the first solid piece of evidence. They had found Alice's backpack, which contained the shoes she had been wearing that day. It was found relatively close to her home. This discovery allowed the police to narrow their search, focusing on a small area near the canal. Investigators realized it was unlikely that Alice would have removed her own shoes, thrown them with her backpack, and run away. She did not have a spare pair of shoes with her, which complicated the situation even more. Scotland Yard decided to release all available security camera footage of Alice. The backpack and shoes indicated that the girl might be in serious danger. The main theory continued to be that of abduction, but investigators had not completely ruled out the possibility of suicide. Therefore, they attempted to use all available resources to locate her. The release of the footage could attract more public attention, and someone might remember seeing Alice that day. Along with this, several 100 more people from various agencies joined the search, and there were now 600 people working on the case. The investigation thus became the largest in terms of police involvement since the year 2005. Some of them were inspecting the area directly, while others reviewed footage from the hundreds of cameras that Alice might have been captured on. Scotland Yard offered a reward of £20,000 for any information that could help find Alice Gross, although they were unable to locate her phone. They did, however, provide the mobile phone company with details of her last known location. It turns out Alice had sent a message to her father from nearly the same place where her backpack would later be found. This suggested that investigators should focus their efforts in that specific area. Therefore, a thorough search of a several square kilometer area was decided upon, with every meter of land and water being manually examined. Police teams meticulously scoured the river and canal for any evidence. 2 days after her backpack was discovered, it was reported that police had detained a 25-year-old man on suspicion of Alice's murder. The following day, another man was arrested, but details were not disclosed until the investigation was clearer. However, both suspects were released soon after, as Scotland Yard could not establish their involvement in Alice's disappearance. More than a week passed with no progress in the case. It wasn't until September 16th that police issued another statement. They were seeking a 40-year-old man named Arnis Alkons in connection with Alice's disappearance. He had moved to England from Latvia 7 years prior and lived in the area as a construction worker. Scotland Yard's interest in him was piqued for 2 reasons that at first glance seemed unrelated. Firstly, Zalkons' co-workers reported him missing to the police on September 3rd. He had not shown up for work, was not answering his phone, and was not at home. It appeared he had simply vanished. Secondly, detectives discovered that Zalkons' route from his home to work roughly followed the same path Alice had taken on the day she disappeared. The detectives soon uncovered something truly disturbing. Security camera footage showed a middle-aged man on a bicycle crossing the bridge Alice had crossed just minutes before. This man was identified as Zalkons. The travel time between these cameras should have taken only minutes, yet it took the man nearly an hour to pass the stretch, raising questions about what he was doing during that time. It was determined that he could not have taken a longer route to the next camera. It simply wasn't there. Moreover, it was concluded that the man's clothes were wet when he re-emerged onto the road. The cameras later recorded him returning to the same area 2 hours later and leaving again 50 minutes after that without being caught by the camera at the bridge, indicating he had spent all this time within a small blind spot and had changed clothes. About an hour later, Zalkons was recorded in a local shop buying beer. The next morning, he returned to the same blind spot between the cameras around 7 a.m. and again in the afternoon. This was enough evidence to obtain a search warrant for his house where he lived with his girlfriend and 2 daughters. His roommate had no idea where Zalkons had gone. Upon learning he was a suspect in the girl's murder, the roommate said Zalkons could never have done such a thing, describing him as a caring and attentive father. However, Scotland Yard investigated Zalkons' background and uncovered a truly sinister past. In 1998, while in Latvia, Zalkons had coldly and calculatedly murdered his wife, burying her in a pre-dug grave in the forest, for which he only served 7 years in prison. After serving his sentence, He moved to England and the local authorities were not even aware of his criminal past in his home country. Police searching Zalcones' house found a freshly dug plot on his property. They did not reveal if they found any evidence there, but they did make a significant discovery in the basement: a broken back panel of a white iPhone 4S, the same model Alice had possessed. A search of his computer revealed that he had searched for information about Alice Gross's disappearance days after the incident. Consequently, Zalcones was added to the wanted list. Fearing he may have fled to Latvia or another European country, Scotland Yard issued a search across the European Union. However, they could not find a single trace of the suspect. A month had passed since Alice's disappearance, and on September 30th, the police made a grim announcement. A human body was found in a river near the area of the girl's disappearance. The body was not immediately identified, but the police shared a chilling detail. Someone had gone to great lengths to keep the body submerged and hidden from the surface. The next day, the police confirmed that the deceased was Alice Gross. There was no longer any doubt. The exact location where the body was found was where she had disappeared, and the cause of death was strangulation. Alice's body had been wrapped in construction bags, tied to a large tree stump. Furthermore, a structure had been built using a bicycle wheel and bricks to keep the body submerged. She was found wearing only a sock. Detectives visited the workplace of Arne Zalcones and discovered that the same type of bags used to conceal Alice Gross's body had also been used at the construction site where he worked. Following the discovery of the body, the police continued their search for Zalcones, working closely with Interpol and local European intelligence agencies. However, no trace of him was found. This continued until October 4th, when investigators made an unexpected discovery. They found a man's body hanging in a park, just a kilometer from where Alice had been murdered. 2 days later, it was confirmed that the deceased was Arne Zalcones. This development was unforeseen. The prevailing theory of Scotland Yard was that the suspect had fled to Europe, but it turned out he had been in the vicinity the entire time. Medical experts concluded that the man had taken his own life on the day of his disappearance, September 3rd, and he was not found for a month. There was nothing surprising in the discovery location. Zalcones had chosen a very remote and inaccessible spot, making it exceedingly difficult to locate him. With Zalcones' DNA in hand, investigators had even more evidence. Close to where Alice's body was found, the police discovered a cigarette butt, which was sent to the laboratory. The DNA extracted from the filter matched Zalcones' sample. Moreover, the laboratory stated that it was very likely that the perpetrator's DNA would be found on the victim's body, although they could not state this with absolute certainty due to the time the body had been underwater. His DNA was also found on the girl's backpack and shoes. By that time, the police had uncovered another horrifying fact. It turned out that 2 years after moving to England, Zalcones had abused a 14-year-old girl about a kilometer from where Alice's body was found. The man attempted some kind of indecent act, but the victim survived and the man was arrested. This is where things get complicated. The girl did not press formal charges and the assailant was simply released. It's not entirely clear how this could have happened, but the fact remains that an adult man who had abused a girl fell into the hands of the police and was freed from punishment. Moreover, information about the case came to light after the discovery of the perpetrator's body in the park. Nevertheless, the police continued their investigation and took some time to reconstruct what had happened. According to their findings, on that unfortunate day of August 28th, Zalcones was cycling along the same route that Alice was walking. He found her in a secluded area hidden from public view and attacked her with the intention of committing depraved acts. We will never know exactly how events unfolded from there, but the outcome was tragic. He killed Alice and then hid her body in various locations, always returning to the scene of the crime. We will also never understand why he decided to take his own life after what he had done. It is very debatable whether this can be called a manifestation of conscience. Alice's parents, who have endured such a terrible tragedy, felt outraged by the government's handling of the situation. They questioned how the British authorities had allowed a convicted murderer to enter the country and stay here. For years, they have been fighting for the government to tighten immigration controls to keep criminals at bay. Unfortunately, to this day, they have not managed to make a significant difference. A month after Alice's body was discovered, another noteworthy incident occurred. The coroner responsible for the investigation had left a folder with case documents on a train. 30 pages contained important information about the murder, including medical information and undisclosed details. The public, the media, and Alice's parents harshly criticized the police. However, they could do nothing about it as the file could not be found. Nevertheless, the deceased suspect was not judged by anyone. Investigators said that if he had been alive, they would have had enough evidence to take the case to court. But there was no guarantee of a conviction. The problem was that all the evidence available against Zalkins was circumstantial, and there was little chance of securing a conviction. However, an inquest was held in court where the jury acknowledged an already evident fact. Alice had been murdered. Her death was not an accident. The procedure was formal and did not play a significant role. Alice's funeral took place on October 23rd. 1,000 people attended her memorial, and at the end of the ceremony, a beautiful song that the girl had written and sung herself was projected on a large screen. The sad case of Melanie Stacy Amaya. Melanie Stacy Amaya was born on February 22, 2002 in the municipality of San Rafael, in the department of Antioquia, Colombia. Her parents, William Amaya and Maria Leon, were overjoyed at her birth despite being very young. They had been planning to have a daughter and their wish was finally fulfilled. Later, the family grew with the arrival of another girl, Natalie. The two sisters got along very well and played together all the time. From her childhood, Melania showed a cheerful and fun personality. Her smile was her main feature and she was also very flirtatious, often asking her mother for makeup to paint her dolls. Despite not having many resources, her parents always managed to give her everything she needed. She was one of the best students in school with excellent grades. Over the years, Melanie developed a very strong character. She was proud and always wanted to be right about everything. However, this did not prevent her from having an excellent relationship with her mother. Whenever they fought, they would reconcile, share everything, and support each other. When Melanie entered adolescence, her parents separated on good terms. Shortly after, Maria met Ruben Morales and they became a couple. Later, they decided to move in together. Both Melanie and her sister went with them, settling in the Manrique neighborhood in Medellin. Their relationship with their stepfather was excellent. They considered him their second father. Ruben respected their bond with William, always reminding them that he was there to help raise them, but did not want them to stop seeing their biological father. By the time she turned 16, Melanie was a very pretty young woman who liked to dress up and go out partying. She had many friends who held her in high esteem. It was at this time that she discovered her passion, electronic music. She decided she wanted to be a DJ and her family supported her in everything, beginning to save money to buy her a console. They were sure that whatever she did would be excellent, as she was extremely intelligent. However, Melanie never got to fulfill her dreams. On Thursday, June 28, 38, Melanie was getting ready to go to the birthday party of Isaac, her best friend. Although they had celebrated the week before, they were ready for another party. The party was to be held at a nightclub located on Carrera 45, an area known for its nightlife. When she finished getting ready, she told her mother that she was leaving. Her mother asked her to take care and not to return too late. They hugged, and Melanie got into her Uber heading to the club, but she never arrived. Isaac arrived at the nightclub and noticed his friend's absence. The techno music was very loud and the place was crowded. He began to look for her everywhere. When he couldn't find her, he started sending her messages. But Melanie didn't respond. Isaac thought she might be with Maria Londuno, her neighbor and closest friend, and decided to wait until the next day and celebrated his birthday as usual. Maria woke up at 7 in the morning and noticed that her daughter had not returned. Her room was just as she had left it the night before while getting ready. Worried, Maria began to call her phone, but it was out of service. She thought it might be out of battery and that Melanie might be at a friend's house, but it seemed strange that she had not tried to communicate with her. Maria decided to call Isaac, who told her that Melanie had never arrived at the nightclub and might be with a friend. Maria contacted all of her daughter's acquaintances, but there were no signs of her and no one knew her whereabouts. Finally, she spoke to some friends who said that Melanie had arrived at the club's door, but did not enter, thinking she might have gone to another party. Completely desperate, Maria called her ex-husband and gave him the terrible news. He tried to calm her, saying it was still early and that Melanie might be sleeping at someone's house. But the afternoon came and Melanie did not appear. Her parents tried to report her disappearance at the police station, but since it was a holiday, they were not taken seriously and were told to wait longer. Trying to stay composed, her parents thought she might have gone to a farm, probably celebrating the long weekend, likely with no cell phone signal, and that's why she hadn't communicated with them. But deep down, they knew that wasn't true. They sensed that something bad was happening. Maria, Ruben, and William began their own search, covering all the places where they thought Melanie could be, from the houses of her acquaintances to parks and the streets of the nightclubs she frequented. After an initial search, they decided to post flyers all over the city with a detailed description of the young girl, including a photograph that Melanie had taken the night she disappeared. She was seen wearing a short blouse, light blue jeans, and white sneakers. Her physical characteristics were described as slender, short in height, with black hair, brown eyes, and several tattoos. A rose on her chest, a moon on her forearm, and wings on her back. Her most distinctive tattoos were a fish on her right leg, covering a motorcycle burn, and one under her clavicle that said "Crazy Life." She also had a belly button piercing and a peritonitis scar on her abdomen, making her easily recognizable. While distributing the flyers to pedestrians and police officers on the street, they made it clear they were utterly desperate and that the official search should start as soon as possible. The news spread quickly and social media was flooded with images of Melanie. The weekend passed terribly. Maria couldn't sleep, constantly thinking about her daughter. Finally, early on Monday, Maria went to the police station to report her daughter missing. The search was categorized as urgent due to Melanie being a minor. Officers checked hospitals and morgues to see if anyone named Melanie or matching her physical characteristics had been admitted, but they found no trace of her. Melanie's parents clung to the hope of finding her alive, but the days became longer and her absence more worrying. Then the first lead emerged. A witness approached the police station to give a statement, saying they had seen Melanie on the night of June 28th near the L. Palmer soccer field. They noted that the young woman was dirty and beaten, as if she had fallen, and was accompanied by a young man wearing loose clothes, a cap, and large sports shoes. While this testimony contributed to the search, the situation remained complicated. The description of the boy with Melanie was very general, as most of her friends dressed that way. However, Maria thought of one person, Miguel Naranjo, her daughter's ex-boyfriend. The 18-year-old had ended his relationship with Melanie 3 months earlier on bad terms. Maria asked her younger daughter to contact him. Miguel claimed to know nothing about Melanie's whereabouts, emphasizing that he hadn't seen her for weeks. He then expressed great concern, saying he would be devastated if something happened to her as he still cared for her deeply. However, days later, more testimonies contradicted Miguel's statements, with all witnesses saying they saw them together at a party that night and that he was very drunk. Following these declarations, the prosecutor's office began to consider Miguel the main suspect in Melanie's disappearance. They obtained a warrant to search his house, but they found no trace of Melanie, leaving them back where they started, without the slightest idea of the girl's whereabouts. On July 5th of the same year, Maria woke up in anguish, unable to believe that her daughter was still missing. She prayed to God to bring her back, alive or dead, as she couldn't stand the uncertainty anymore. Her prayers were answered, but not in a good way. That same day, Maria received a call from an unknown number. On the other end of the line, a voice told her to stop searching for her daughter because she was already in another world and buried in a place called El Calvario. Without allowing for more questions, the caller asked Maria not to reveal their identity to the police, as they had not spoken earlier due to fear. After the call ended, Maria quickly headed to the police station. Along with her husband and 2 officers, they set out towards the mountain, and she also notified everyone she knew to help with the search. They arrived at El Granizal neighborhood of Medellin, where the mountain was located. The territory was large, with many entrances and full of bushes. To reach the hill, they had to climb many steep stairs and pass through squatter houses, which was extremely dangerous. They decided to split into several groups to cover the area more quickly. Ruben went towards an area full of bushes behind one of the houses. The ground was full of large footprints, as if someone had been dragged. He followed the trail and noticed a sight with many flies buzzing around and have a penetrating odor. He grabbed a stick and began moving the rocks on the ground. When he turned over one of them, he saw something terrible, a human head. He immediately called the police officers who were searching nearby. At first, they thought it could be an animal, as animals were often dumped in that area. They continued removing stones and spotted blood. Finally, they could clearly see the face, which was completely disfigured, but it was evident that it belonged to a human body. Maria couldn't stop crying, not wanting it to be her daughter. Natalie thought it might be another girl who had also been missing for some time. The whole family was in denial. The officers notified the forensic medicine services. When they were able to unearth the body, all doubts were cleared. Despite the mutilation, they could discern the tattoo on the girl's chest. The body was completely unclothed, with the mouth open and filled with dirt, all teeth broken, and one of the eyes dislodged. There was also something very strange. The person who buried her had thrown calcium oxide over her. The body was exhumed by the criminalistics and transferred to the Institute of Legal Medicine and Forensic Sciences. After a few hours, experts confirmed that it was none other than Melanie. Although her body showed signs of all types of violence, the cause of death was mechanical asphyxia. Due to the advanced state of decomposition, it could not be determined if the young woman had been sexually abused, but they could confirm that she had been severely mistreated. Her family was inconsolable. There was no longer any hope of finding her alive, but they could still find the terrible person who had committed the sinister crime. The media published the news of the discovery, and all viewers' eyes turned to Ruben, believing that the fact he had found the body while alone made him a possible suspect. However, the community had other opinions. They knew Melanie had no enemies, but had an idea of who might want to harm her. Everyone was aware that her relationship with Miguel had not ended well and that he was a rather violent young man. Meanwhile, Miguel continued sending messages to Melanie's relatives, saying he was very distressed by the young woman's loss and had done everything possible to find her. But no one believed him anymore, and an angry mob of neighbors showed up at his home to lynch him. The police took advantage of this event to take him to the police station, claiming they were protecting him, but the real objective was to interrogate him. His statement was quick. He said he was innocent and seemed very sure of his words. As there was no evidence against him, they had to let him go. Almost simultaneously, Ruben was cleared of any involvement in the case. There was no evidence suggesting he had anything to do with his stepdaughter's murder. Even with Miguel as the main suspect, investigators began to delve into the relationship he had with Melanie. According to sources close to the young woman, the couple met in 2016 when she was 14 and he was 17. Melanie organized a party with her best friends and hired a DJ who was Miguel. She was enchanted by him and they began dating that same week, later becoming official. They went everywhere together, even on outings with friends. Everyone liked Miguel. They noticed he was loving with Melanie and cared for her deeply. Over the months, the young man started spending more and more time at her house, becoming an integral part of the family. Maria knew that Miguel had problems with his mother. He had told her that she often beat him and sometimes left him without food. Melanie's family cared for him so much that they decided to take him into their home as if he were another son. In the first months of living together, everything was rosy and they were closer than ever. However, over time, the relationship between the two teenagers began to crumble. They argued constantly and Miguel was extremely bothered by Melanie's liking for dressing up flirtatiously. She was so affected that she decided to leave school and started doing something she had never done before: consuming substances. Maria took a while to realize this and confronted her daughter. Melanie told her she had only done it a few times, always in Miguel's company. This is how Miguel lost all the trust and respect of the family, and from then on, the situation only worsened. The fights became violent and physical. Miguel constantly hit Melanie, leaving marks on her neck and arms. One day, he beat her so severely that he stained the entire room with blood. Maria tried to help her daughter, but Melanie asked her not to interfere in their relationship and pleaded to continue living together. Their friends were also worried. They noticed how her spirit was fading. They saw her cry every day and advised her to leave him. After 2 years of ups and downs, on May 23, 1938, the young couple had their last violent fight. Melanie decided to definitively leave Miguel and threw him out of her house, but he did not accept this and began to stalk and follow her everywhere. Ruben decided to go to the prosecutor's office to report that his stepdaughter was in danger and request a restraining order, but sadly, this measure was never carried out. In the following months, Michael continued to seek Melanie, swearing that if she gave him another chance, he would do things differently, but she never agreed. And so, without any help from the police, the young woman tried to continue with her life as normally as possible until the terrible incident on June 28th. After gathering all possible testimonies about the young couple's relationship, the officers investigated Miguel's criminal history. They discovered that despite his young age, he already had reports of domestic abuse. Records indicated he had beaten his mother and siblings. They also found the report Ruben had filed months earlier and the testimony of a friend of Melanie's. This young man declared that Miguel had said if he found out she was with someone else, he would kill her. But that wasn't the most shocking part. The person who had called Maria decided to reveal their identity. It was a relative of Miguel's who lived with him in a residence, very close to where Melanie's body was found. The relative recounted that on the night of June 29th, they saw Miguel arrive at the house around midnight with a shovel and muddy shoes. Minutes later, he started a fire and began burning clothes and makeup, then took a long shower. With all the evidence gathered, on 10 that year, the agents obtained an arrest warrant against Miguel. He voluntarily presented himself at the police and was charged with aggravated femicide. He did not accept the charges and declared himself innocent with a strange smile on his face. After 6 months of delaying the judicial process, Miguel decided to make a plea deal, accepting the charges that identify him as the author of the crime in exchange for a reduced sentence. Once the judges agreed, he began to recount the last hours of the young woman's life. On June 28, 1938, Miguel saw Melanie at the disco where Isaac's birthday party would be held. He approached to talk to her, but quickly noticed she was exchanging messages with another boy. This triggered uncontrollable jealousy in him. He couldn't believe she already had another man. They began a heated argument, which turned violent. He hit her hard and threw her to the ground. Then they went to a football field, where the dispute continued. At some point, he grabbed her by the neck and strangled her until she died. At that moment, he decided to hit her body. He then returned home to burn her clothes and belongings. In his statement, Miguel excused himself by saying he had acted under the influence of drugs. The account was quite imprecise. Miguel did not want to clarify where he killed Melanie or how he hid the body. The agents assumed that after taking her to the sports complex, he persuaded her to talk alone near where he buried her. They only had 2 certainties. Miguel was guilty of femicide and his motive for committing the crime had been jealousy and obsession. Psychological analyses showed that he was an aggressive, possessive person with an explosive character. However, they also proved that he was fully aware of his actions when he committed the crime, so he had to face trial. On Friday, January 1839, almost 7 months after the young woman's murder, the first hearing was held. Miguel was found guilty of aggravated femicide and sentenced to 34 years and 8 months in prison. After hearing the jury's decision, he apologized to Melanie's family and society and was transferred to a prison in Medellin. While the family was satisfied with the verdict, they all said they would never forgive him. After the trial, they united more than ever. The young woman's biological father thanked everyone on his Facebook account for the support they had given him during the process. He said that although the sentence would not bring his daughter back, it at least set an example that such cases do not always go unpunished. However, there is a reality. The authorities had been alerted about Miguel's dangerousness. If they had followed through with the restraining order, Melanie might still be alive. the case of Nicole Adamando. Christopher Grover and Nicole Adamando met in 2008 when he was 21 and she was 19. They both worked as gymnastics trainers at a fitness center and began dating in February 12th. After Nicole became pregnant with their first child, they moved in together in Salt Point, New York. However, they were not in a hurry to get married. Their son, Ben, was born in 2013, and 2 years later in 2015 they welcomed their second child, a daughter named Faye. Christopher took great pride in being a father of two. But this seemingly perfect family life changed suddenly. At 2 a.m. on September 28, 37, near Nicole's house, police officer Richard Sisley spotted a car stopped at a red light. When the light turned green, the car did not move. To get the driver's attention, he honked his horn. What happened next shocked him. The driver was Nicole, and her children were in the back seat. Seeing the police, Nicole got out of the car and told him that something terrible had happened in her apartment. She looked very worried and stressed. He later asked her to take deep breaths and exhale several times to calm down. Nicole reported that her husband, Christopher Grover, was lying on the couch in their apartment. She claimed that he had insulted and threatened her, prompting her to try to escape. Christopher was also in possession of a weapon. In a moment of panic, she grabbed the weapon and aimed it at him. He then threatened her, saying he would harm their children and himself. Desperate, she pleaded with him to let her go, promising to leave without telling anyone. However, he refused, insisting that she lie down next to him. Fearing for her life, she attacked him on the head. He fell back onto the couch and died. She then gathered the children, put them in the car, and drove away until she encountered a police officer at a traffic light. After speaking with the officer, Nicole called her friend Elizabeth and asked her to come over. When Elizabeth arrived, she was blocked from approaching Nicole. In a nearby parking lot, she saw ambulances and police cars rushing to the scene of the incident at Christopher and Nicole's apartment. The police entered the apartment and discovered Christopher lying on the couch with a bullet in his head. A weapon lay on the floor nearby and the rug shifted slightly. The shower was running, and in the bathroom, a broken laptop lay submerged in water. The police took Nicole to the station for questioning. Meanwhile, Christopher's mother, Gail Grover, was informed of the devastating news. She expressed disbelief, saying she had never suspected her son was facing any problems. Christopher was a kind and cheerful person who loved sports, held a black belt in Taekwondo, and worked as a gymnastics coach. One of his students, Bad Wellen, shared that Christopher was always upbeat and full of energy, constantly encouraging his students and never allowing them to feel discouraged. Nicole's friend Elizabeth provided a very different perspective. Elizabeth taught music at the school where Nicole's son, Ben, attended. One day, Elizabeth noticed that Nicole had a black eye. At that time, she was dressed in jeans, a long-sleeved blouse, and a scarf. Throughout the previous summer, she consistently covered herself in thick clothing. Other acquaintances had also observed bruises on her body, but chose not to ask her about them. Nicole often claimed that her injuries occurred during games, attributing them to an accidental hit by a woman from her gym. Concerns about Christopher's behavior were growing. Some people noticed he was becoming increasingly angry with his gymnasts, and there were rumors that he was abusing his wife, Nicole. During police questioning, Nicole claimed that she attacked Christopher in self-defense. She was subsequently arrested and charged with a second-degree crime, which could result in a 20-year prison sentence. A few weeks after the tragedy, Christopher's friends, family, and former students came together to release balloons in his memory. A friend of Nicole's, Elizabeth, had started organizing rallies and fundraisers to support her. Elizabeth shared that in April 2016, Nicole finally confided that Christopher was verbally abusive and that they frequently argued. Nicole explained that they had no issues at the start of their relationship, but after the birth of their son, their conflicts intensified. He began pressuring her to engage in intimate relations more often. On one occasion, Christopher violently pushed Nicole against a doorframe and assaulted her. 2 years later, when she was pregnant again, a similar incident occurred. After that, she sought help at a hospital. The doctor examined her and sent her home. A few days later, while Nicole was preparing breakfast for her son, Christopher entered the kitchen and demanded that she do something for him. Nicole sarcastically replied that she would do it, sir. He got angry and knocked her to the floor. Then he heated a spoon on the gas stove and burned her with it. Nicole sought medical assistance again, and the examination report confirmed that Christopher had burned her in several places with the heated spoon. Nicole said there were times when Christopher tied her up, abused her, and left her lying on the floor for hours. He eventually untied her, leaving her with red marks on her arms and neck. When Nicole confided in her friend Elizabeth about her situation, Elizabeth encouraged her to file charges against Christopher. However, whenever she thought about reporting him to the police, she hesitated. Afraid that no one would believe her, some were worried that taking action might worsen her circumstances. In the summer of 2016, Nicole decided to leave Christopher. She packed her things and took the children to Elizabeth's house. She saw Nicole's car drive by her house many times. Finally, she called Nicole, encouraging her to come in. Nicole agreed, but ultimately did not have the courage to do so and returned home. In the months before Christopher's death, Nicole visited a doctor 3 times, who noted several injuries on her body. In May 2017, the doctor noted burns on Nicole's skin. In June 2017, the doctor observed that Nicole's vulva was severely swollen and appeared to be turned inside out. By August 2017, there were more bruises on her body, along with her account of abuse by Christopher. In September 2017, the Protection Service received an anonymous tip to check on a family. Nicole said they had been informed that someone was coming to check the apartment. Concerned, Christopher packed a large bag with items he had used to abuse Nicole. He took this bag with him to work, then returned without it, and in a good mood. That evening, he called Nicole into the bedroom, handed her a weapon, and asked her to load it. Holding up a bullet for her to see, Nicole did as he asked and then went into the bathroom to take a shower. Christopher then entered the bathroom, threw his laptop at her, and asked her to have intimate relations on the couch. They moved from the bathroom to the living room. He was unusually gentle with her while they were intimate. Afterward, as Nicole rested in a chair, she thought Christopher had fallen asleep. Trying to get up quietly, she was startled when he pulled a weapon from under the pillow. In a panic, Nicole grabbed the weapon and aimed it at Christopher. He laughed and mocked her, saying that this would happen. He demanded that she hand the weapon over to him, threatening to kill her, their son, their daughter, and even himself. No one would survive. In response to his threats, Nicole attacked him on the head. In March 2019, Nicole faced trial for the death of her husband, Christopher Grover. Supporters, wearing purple to represent victims of domestic violence, stood by her side. Christopher's mother, Gail, argued that her son could not have harmed Nicole and believed someone was trying to draw attention by lying. She also recalled witnessing her grandson, Ben, hit Nicole with a guitar during a game. The prosecutor's office stated that Nicole was pretending to be a victim and insisted her claims of abuse were false. A forensic expert noted that the weapon was held to Christopher's head when it went off. At the time of his death, his head was resting on a pillow and the bullet that killed him was found inside the pillow. Therefore, the prosecutor asserted that he was sleeping when Nicole attacked him. However, Nicole's lawyer accused Christopher of damaging the laptop and dunking it in water to erase the evidence. Although the laptop was found in the bathtub and examined, no information was recovered from it. Nicole reported that he had removed the hard drive from the laptop and disposed of it the day before the incident. However, prosecutors believe Nicole may have damaged her laptop to make others think Christopher was trying to hide evidence of a crime. Furthermore, the prosecution claimed that Nicole texted Christopher a few days before his death, in which she criticized him, called him a jerk, and said he was really stupid. They also revealed that 6 weeks before the tragedy, Nicole had messaged a friend saying that she didn't know how to kill him without getting caught, and she ended the message with a laughing emoji. A lawyer argued that the situation was merely a joke and that Nicole sent aggressive messages to Christopher for self-protection. Their apartment included a sewing room, where police discovered a video camera on the floor. Nicole alleged that he had thrown the camera down, but prosecutors believed that Nicole placed it there herself to suggest that Christopher was trying to destroy evidence of his abuse. The video camera contained no incriminating evidence. The prosecutor noted that Nicole had experienced trauma at the age of 5, having been abused during a sleepover at a friend's house, which led her to avoid spending the night at others' homes. As an adult, when she met Christopher, she confessed to having difficulties with intimacy. They didn't become physically close until a year into their relationship, during which he was caring and understanding. Prosecutors also argued that Nicole made up her story of abuse to get away from Christopher. She allegedly lied to her friends, doctors, and did not report the incidents to the police. A doctor testified that Nicole claimed she was abused by a worker who was renovating her mother's apartment building about 5 years ago. However, during the trial, a witness admitted she could not clearly remember the incident or identify the perpetrator, whether it was the worker or Christopher. Around the same time, Nicole met a married police officer who offered her a job as a live-in nanny. Christopher was familiar with this officer through work. It was revealed that Nicole had been in a relationship with this officer for several years, both before and after the birth of her son, Ben, and she stated that he also forced her into intimacy. During the trial, Nicole's lawyers presented photographs of injuries she sustained during her time with Christopher, claiming he was responsible for them. However, the prosecutor maintained that the injuries could have been caused by someone else, and it was unclear who had inflicted them. The prosecutor pointed out inconsistencies in the medical records from when Nicole was pregnant for the second time and went to the hospital. When answering many questions, she replied no, denying that Christopher had abused or burned her. The prosecutor argued that Nicole changed her story and returned to the hospital a few days later to assert that Christopher had burned her. The prosecutor argued that Nicole's primary motive was her fear of being exposed during an upcoming inspection by security services at their apartment. She feared they wouldn't find any evidence of abuse, which could lead to accusations of lying and loss of her rights as a mother. In contrast, Nicole's lawyer contended that she acted in self-defense to protect her children and had no other options. During the trial, friends, psychologists, doctors, and nurses testified on Nicole's behalf, expressing their support for her situation. A photo of Nicole clearly shows her injuries, including a large blister on her face and burns on her chest. Other images reveal bite marks on her shoulder blades and neck, which would be impossible for her to inflict on herself. A forensic expert also confirmed that there was no evidence to suggest Christopher was actually asleep at the time of the attack. Nicole spoke in court and maintained her version of the incident. She appeared emotional and anxious while testifying. She described Christopher as a good and kind father and coach, but stated that he behaved very differently in private. She claimed that after the birth of their daughter, he developed an addiction to adult films, watching them frequently and encouraging her to act out scenarios from those videos. She alleged that he recorded and posted other videos online without her consent, in which he insulted her and behaved abusively. However, these videos were not presented at trial. Elizabeth, a friend and music teacher, testified in defense of Nicole. She recalled an incident in 2016 when Nicole confided in her about having a miscarriage. Nicole's clothes were covered in blood, and she didn't want to go to the hospital because she was afraid of Christopher. Elizabeth mentioned a card that Nicole had made for Christopher when she first became pregnant, listing 25 reasons why he would be a wonderful father. The prosecutor argued that if Christopher was truly abusive, Nicole would not have given him such a heartfelt gift. However, Nicole argued that she had created the card before their relationship fell apart. After 14 days of testimony, the jury had to decide whether Nicole was a victim of abuse or a real criminal. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury dismissed Nicole's self-defense claim and found her guilty of second-degree murder. After the verdict, Christopher's mother felt relieved that her son's reputation, which had been unfairly tarnished, had now been restored. In February 2020, Nicole Adamando was sentenced to 19 years in prison. However, the case was not finished. Under the revised New York State Domestic Violence Justice Act, Nicole was entitled to another court appearance to present her claim of domestic violence for the possibility of a reduced sentence. Later, An appeals court decided that Nicole could be considered for a lighter sentence, reducing it to 7.5 years. While incarcerated, Nicole drew a picture of herself with Ben, holding on to hope that she would soon be released and reunited with her son and daughter. Supporters of Nicole continue to raise funds to help with her legal expenses. The case of Sarah Yarbrough. Sarah Yarbrough was born on June 12, 1975, in Portland. Her parents soon moved to another state, settling in Federal Way, a suburb outside of Seattle. Sarah had 2 siblings and was particularly close to her youngest brother. From a young age, she had a passion for music and ballet. She worked hard in school with the goal of attending a good university. Her academic achievements led her to participate in a school program that took her to New Zealand twice. Later on, Sarah joined her high school's cheerleading team and had a wide circle of friends. She was known for her kindness and willingness to help others in need. On the morning of Saturday, December 14, 1991, when she was 16 years old, Sarah had a gathering with her cheerleading team for an event. They were supposed to meet at the school building where the bus would pick them up. She drove her father's car to the school but arrived at the wrong time. She thought the bus would pick them up at 8 a.m., but it was scheduled for 9 a.m. Her friends gradually arrived at the meeting point, but Sarah was nowhere to be seen. Some students noticed her car in the parking lot, but she wasn't inside. She didn't appear even when the bus arrived for the students. Her friends found this strange, but back then, none of them had mobile phones, so they couldn't contact her. Around the same time, 2 12-year-old children were walking on the school grounds, exploring the wooded area behind the tennis courts. They noticed something unusual. A man emerged from behind the bushes, took a breath, and walked away in the opposite direction. The children found it odd but didn't pay much attention and continued walking. A few meters ahead, they encountered a horrifying sight. A young woman lying on the ground, unresponsive. They thought she might be dead. The children ran home to tell their parents, and one of the children's parents went back to the scene with them. The other child's father decided to follow the suspicious man they had seen earlier. The child mentioned seeing a car that resembled a Chevrolet Nova leaving the area. Since he lived near the school, his father decided to try to locate that car. At one point, he spotted a similar car but quickly lost sight of it, unable to find it again. Meanwhile, the parents of the other child went to the school and realized that the young woman on the ground was likely deceased. They immediately rushed to the school building and called the police. Officers arrived at the scene and confirmed that the young woman was indeed deceased. They were also able to quickly determine that the deceased was Sarah. The police concluded, based on the marks on her neck, that the victim had been strangled. Some of her belongings were found near her body, including her jacket, underwear, and socks. Strangely, her purse and car keys were discovered in the school parking lot, leading investigators to suspect that the assailant might have attacked her near her car and then dragged her behind the trees. The body was handed over to forensic experts and the police began their search for clues. Their initial step was to interview all the people who were in the school premises and its vicinity. 2 boys who had found Sarah provided a rough description of the man who had emerged from behind the bushes near her body. They described him as a tall man around 20 years old, with shoulder-length reddish hair, dressed in a dark coat and black pants. Soon, the police managed to locate another witness, and here is where a surprising twist in the story unfolds. The man who had gone for a run observed a strange scene in the same wooded area. A girl was lying next to the bushes and a man was hovering over her. The girl showed no movement at all, and the witness initially thought that a couple had decided to be intimate in that spot. A few minutes later, he ran on the same road in the opposite direction and both the man and the girl were still there. In both instances, it did not appear to him that a serious crime was being committed. The witness explained to the police that he had recently immigrated to the United States from another culture and was unsure of the typical behavior in the country. Nevertheless, this witness provided the police with a rough description of the assailant, which matched the descriptions given by the children who discovered the body. Investigators interviewed dozens of people who had been near the school but did not find any other useful leads. Meanwhile, medical experts examined Sarah's body and concluded that the cause of her death was strangulation. Apparently, the assailant had used his own socks, and a severe head wound was also found on the girl. Experts believed that the victim had lost consciousness due to this blow, which aligned with the runner's account of seeing the girl lying motionless on the ground. Forensic experts examined Sarah's clothing and found traces of male particles on nearly all of her garments. However, in 1991, there was no DNA database to compare these samples to, so investigators could only rely on direct comparisons of DNA samples from specific suspects. There was another lead that detectives pointed out, although forensic experts found traces of male particles on Sarah's clothing. The forensic doctors stated that there were no signs of sexual assault on her body. With all this information in hand, investigators formed their own opinion of what had happened. Sarah had arrived at the school nearly an hour early, and there was no one else in the parking lot but her. It was most likely that her assailant saw her there, waited for her to exit the car, struck her in the head with an object, causing her to lose consciousness. He then dragged her out of the parking lot behind some trees, where her body would later be found. The assailant had removed some of her clothing and engaged in lewd acts before strangling her with her own socks. When one of the children who discovered Sarah's body reported the car in which the assailant had supposedly fled, detectives initiated a search for a Chevrolet Nova. They quickly found one, but it turned out that the driver of that car had just delivered donuts that morning and provided his DNA sample, which did not match the DNA found on Sarah's clothing. It appeared that the children had simply seen the vehicle driving on the road next to them and mistakenly thought the perpetrator was behind the wheel. In fact, none of the children could remember with exact certainty if they had seen a man approach a car from the bushes. Over the following days, the police officers continued to search for witnesses and new leads, but there were no significant breakthroughs. Classes resumed on Monday, despite the horror that had occurred. Apart from the fact that the murder had taken place just a few meters from their school, the perpetrator remained at large, and his identity was unknown. The girls were afraid to walk alone on the premises, so the boys from the sports teams took it upon themselves to accompany each female student to their car or bus to ensure they weren't left alone on the street. Investigators learned that there were approximately 70 potential witnesses of the school and its surroundings that morning, and they interviewed each one of them, but no new details emerged. Based on the accounts of the two children and the runner, a sketch of the assailant was created and distributed to all local newspapers and television stations. The story received extensive media coverage, and in the weeks that followed, the police received hundreds of tips. Investigators diligently checked each and every one of them, but in every case they hit a dead end. At one point, they received a lead on a man who matched the murder suspect's description and had a criminal record. However, the detectives were unsuccessful in this lead as well, as his DNA did not match the sample found on the victim's clothing. Since then, the case remained stagnant for months. The police received a total of 4,000 different tips and attempted to work with each one of them, but the resources of the local police department were simply insufficient to handle the volume of information. Time was also working against them, as new cases required the investigators' attention every month. When Sarah's family discovered that the police lacked the resources to manage all the tips, they tried to help as much as they could. One family member worked for a technology company and convinced the company's management to temporarily provide the police department with a powerful computer valued at $150,000 in the 1990s. This was a substantial sum, but the company agreed. With this computer, the police could store information on all the leads in one place, process them more quickly, and categorize them for easy review. Despite their efforts, each lead led to a dead end, and they made no progress in the following years. 2 years later, Sarah's classmates graduated, and before their graduation, they decided to commemorate their friend by raising a significant amount of money and using it to create a memorial. It was a bench where Sarah's belongings were cast in metal. Alongside these items was a photo of the girl's dog reaching for her purse. Over the years, the case was periodically reopened, re-examining all available evidence, but the outcome remained the same. They still couldn't get closer to capturing the perpetrator. During this time, the police interviewed several thousand people and collected DNA samples from almost 300 possible suspects, but all efforts were in vain. In 2011, 20 years after the murder, one of the detectives decided to turn to modern technology. He had heard about a company working in the field of genetic genealogy. The detective contacted them and asked, "Can you try to locate the relatives of the person who left their DNA on the victim's body?" The experts took on the task, but unfortunately they failed. Firstly, in 2011, genetic genealogy was just beginning to gain momentum and the experts were limited in their capabilities. For example, they couldn't yet search for both male and female relatives within the same sample. If they had DNA from a man, they could only search for familial connections with other men and vice versa. Secondly, they faced legal obstacles in the form of various laws that prohibited the use of genetic data samples to search for relatives of suspects. However, their efforts did yield some interesting results. On one hand, the team of researchers that the detective approached have been working for several years on creating the genetic pedigree of the first people who arrived in the United States from Britain in 1620 on the Mayflower. After studying the DNA of Sarah's assailant, they discovered that the man was related to one of the ship's passengers, Robert Fuller. However, tracking him through this lineage was nearly impossible, especially in those years. The Mayflower carried just over 100 people, but over the centuries, the number of their descendants has surpassed 25 million. Secondly, the detective had no idea that he had turned Sarah's case into the first of its kind, even though his initial attempt was unsuccessful. It was the first crime that was attempted to be solved with the help of genetic genealogy. The detective tried to utilize the available information and located several men with the last name Fuller who lived in the area of his city at the time of Sarah's murder. He found photos of them and met with the only witnesses, a runner and two men who had found the body when they were children. Unfortunately, none of them recognized the murderer from the photos. Finally, the investigator requested DNA samples from all the Fullers in the area, and they were sent to the laboratory. None of them matched the DNA of the assailant, but something interesting happened here. The experts discovered that one of these men was indeed a distant descendant of Robert Fuller from the same Mayflower ship. However, he was definitely not the murderer, nor did he know of any distant relative living nearby. It's possible that the perpetrator of the crime was related to him through such a distant relative that their family simply never knew of the connection. The detective retired in 2017, and the case was handed over to a new team of investigators. They reached out to the company that had taken over the study of the DNA sample from the assailant in 2011. By then, the capability to study genetic material had advanced significantly, and the experts agreed to try to trace the assailant's lineage. It took them 2 years of painstaking work, using public databases to find even the most distant relatives of the assailant, then manually tracing their family connections to individuals who lived during the time of Sarah's death. In total, they had to eliminate several thousand individuals before they finally got a break. In September 2019, they came up with 2 new possible suspects, brothers Edward and Patrick Nicholas, who, as the DNA showed, were descendants of Robert Fuller. The experts determined that it was highly likely that a DNA sample from Sarah's clothing belonged to one of 2 brothers. At the time of the murder, one was 33 years old and the other was 27. The older brother turned out to be a career criminal with an extensive history of violent offenses. He had been in prison and his DNA sample was in the FBI database, which meant he had nothing to do with Sarah's murder because his DNA would have shown a match in the 1990s if he were the perpetrator. As for the younger brother, named Patrick Nicholas, he had also been arrested multiple times by the police for violent crimes, including against minors. However, this was before the DNA samples of such offenders were added to the database. The detectives immediately placed the man under surveillance. Patrick, who was 55 years old at the time, lived in a neighboring city called Wellington. The police had been following his every move for 2 days, and soon, an opportunity presented itself. Patrick went to the laundromat, and while waiting for his clothes to wash, he stepped outside to smoke and discarded a cigarette butt on the ground. One of the officers immediately collected it in an evidence bag and returned to his car. Patrick stepped out to smoke for a second time, and this time a cloth handkerchief fell out of his pocket. The officers pick it up. The police settled for taking the second piece of evidence in case the experts couldn't extract a DNA sample from the cigarette butt. However, the forensic experts were able to easily obtain samples from all these items, and the following day, they delivered the long-awaited news to the detective. Patrick's DNA was a perfect match with the traces found on Sarah's clothing in 1991. The judge immediately issued an arrest warrant for the man, and the police took him into custody. It took 5 days for the investigators to ascertain his name before formally charging him with murder. When his biography was leaked to the media, many began to ask a perfectly logical question. Why was a man with such a history of criminal activity not even considered a suspect for all these 28 years? At the age of 19, Patrick Nicholas approached a young woman and got into her car, where he attempted to assault her. The victim managed to escape and flee, but she had to jump into a river and swim for a long time to reach a safe distance from her assailant. Patrick spent 4 years in prison before being released. The next offense for which he was arrested occurred in 1994 when he tried to assault a minor. He was detained again, but his DNA was not recorded in any database. The reason is peculiar. The charge for which he was prosecuted was not serious enough to collect DNA, and the police never came across his name in 3 decades. He also did not appear in any of the 4,000 leads obtained over the years. It was also revealed why genetic genealogy experts couldn't trace him back to Robert Fuller. It turned out that Patrick's biological lineage was adopted, and he grew up with the adoptive surname. One of the men who discovered Sarah's body when they were children in 1991 immediately asserted that Patrick was undoubtedly the same killer. He admitted that the incident had deeply affected him. He was only 12 years old when the body was discovered and the perpetrator had seen his face. For many years, the witness lived in constant fear that the killer would come after him, and only after Patrick's arrest did he finally feel safe. Patrick's trial did not begin until 2023. The man insisted he was innocent, and his lawyer attempted to challenge the main piece of evidence, the DNA. He argued that the presence of Patrick's DNA on the victim's clothing did not prove his guilt, but that argument did not hold. The lawyer also tried to challenge the accuracy of the DNA analysis, but the experts declared such claims to be entirely untenable. Ultimately, Patrick was found guilty of first-degree murder without premeditation. On May 25th, he was sentenced to 45 years and 8 months in prison, making it virtually impossible for him to ever be released. During the sentencing, Patrick showed no emotion, unlike Sarah's family. They also spoke before the judge, thanking everyone involved in the trial and the investigators for bringing the killer to justice, despite his ability to elude it for 28 years. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.